Good evening. Waiting for everything to catch up here. As you can see, I am hardwired to my modem. It's at the cords are all at their capacity, their max length, so it just perfectly fits. So we're gonna hope this works a little bit better this Wednesday evening. And Mr. John Sensei is here. Hi, John. I was gonna type it to you. I was about ready to do what you were doing last night. Say it and type it at the same time. So, hi, John. Thank you so much. Glad you're here. How was your day? John says his day has been fine, and my day has been pretty good too. It was my first day in probably about a week that I didn't have to go to work, so I mean, I don't work super hard, but it's a long drive, and you know, today I just didn't have anywhere to go, so it was nice being at home today for a while. And I've been working on a scarf for my mom, and I'm loving how it's turning out. It looks really good, so this is my second attempt. That's why I can be arrogant about it, because my first attempt I don't like as much. But I got a different yarn, and I've been doing the same pattern, and I like it a lot more. It looks really good, so that's exciting. But it might be going away. I'm having some tea because I had a little bit of a headache. I took a nap this afternoon, and it was one of those naps where you wake up feeling kind of worse, which doesn't really happen to me that often, but today I just kind of woke up and was like, kind of had a little bit of a headache, so try to be on my A- game at least. And hey, I need like a cheat sheet of everyone's names. I don't want to guess wrong. Is it Ethan? I'm so terrible with names and like crossing I know who you are, but like remembering and crossing over the names. Oh God, I need to start doing that. I need to be a better person about these kinds of things. Yay! I was right, it's Ethan! Oh, I just found, yay! Good. Hi, Ethan. Thank you so much. Yay. Thanks for coming. These are notes from work about birdseed, because I work at a birdseed store, so I can probably use it for scratch paper. And John says he's sending love and light. Thank you, John. I really super appreciate that. It helps a lot. It really does. Okay. Alrighty. how was your day, week, Ethan? How are you doing? How are you feeling? Long, busy, and you feel like things are in repeat. I know that feeling for sure. Oof. You know, habits, I correlate a lot with like the catalyst of the body. And I think about the wheel, and I think about how when we do something, we create like neural pathways in our brain, and the more we do things over and over, we empower that pathway and the facilitation of using that pathway. And so when we try to break habits, it's just like impossible because our thoughts and our actions just automatically shoot down this neural pathway that we've created, and it's just almost impossible. Like there's something in our brains that fights to retain that, what it's gained from the habit and the repetition of the habit. And it's like survival stuff, but it really, in our current 3rd/4th density society that we live in, it's really not helpful at all. Yeah, Ethan says he wants to fight the pathways, and that's how I try to, like, because again, it's like the wheel, and then I think about the wheel just getting stuck in a rut, and you just can't. It's just like there's 2 ruts in the road that your wheels are going down, and there's no other option for you once that mud sets into hard dirt. But yeah, that's all I can say really about that, other than commiserating that I know that struggle. Ethan says, it feels like I bounce between my 4 main pathways I established, but I need to make fresh new ones. You know, one thing that I take from my friendship with Jim McCarty and like learning from his wisdom is he has this routine, and in some ways his routine is almost sometimes kind of ruts in the road, but the routine is mostly like meditation and caring for his cats, but he's got it on a schedule, and it's like the clock ticks and it's time to do this, it's time for morning meditation, it's time to feed the cats, it's time for afternoon meditation, it's time for lunch, and he eats the same thing for breakfast. And you know, that's a really, I think there's something about creating the ruts that you want, and at least like ones that serve you and give you some sort of fulfillment, instead of make you feel so frustrated that you can't even change your patterns a little bit. Like I get it, I understand that feeling, that frustration, and running on the same programs and recognizing the programs just don't even serve me anymore, and knowing that, and then still not being able to act otherwise. It's so frustrating. Try again. I'm just such a not type A person. Like I want to be able to like write a schedule and say I'm going to do this at this time of the day, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then but the idea of that, like, it's difficult to deal with as well. But yeah, I think I don't know if that's the consequence of my parents not giving me enough structure as a child or what, but it's possible. think to take that train of thought down its track a little bit further, the transformation of the mind is about harvesting what we desire from our past experiences in a conscious way, saying, okay, I want to take this with me into this new day and leave this behind, essentially, and being able to do that. That is what the transformation of the mind is, essentially. Oh, Ethan says changing topic, kinda. But can we talk about archetypes today? Maybe start with the ones that you've had more personal experience with. Interesting. Yeah, we can talk about the archetypes today. Let me pull up the pictures. So, my experience with the archetypes in general is, I realized this was and I don't want to puff it up. And it's not that, I wanted to say powerful. It's a powerful tool, and not in the way that it helps you manifest things, or, it allows you to, it's the secret or something. It's not like that, The real secret is what's inside of you, not the things and stuff that you can get outside of you. And so that's where the mystery lies within. So it is about going within and learning how to communicate with the deeper self through that which is physically manifest. Not controlling which is what was physically manifest, but looking at what's physically manifest, akin to a dream state, that's often said to be something that's really a powerful way, not to go through your day like you're in a dream, but to look at the symbolism that's presented to you in your day-to-day activities in the same way that you look at symbolism in a dream. So it's kind of how I see the archetypes, as like a symbolism map. And the more you use the map, the more you correlate things to different symbols. And so then those symbols can show up and manifest and then communicate to you in mundane symbols, essentially, because the archetypes have flowers and birds and stars and cups and black and white and, people and the devil, really obvious and simple symbols that are common for a reason because they're archetypical. And, we have a common language of symbols in our unconscious, deeper mind of the collective mind, but it's about our personal relationship and interpretation to these symbols from our own personal life experience. To kind of give an example of that, I don't know if I told this story before. I feel like I've said it out loud, so maybe I did tell it on the screen or on the stream, but this is the experience of the spirit. What I see here is another recapitulation of the two paths. We have the destinations, the white temple and the black temple, representing the service to others and service to self path. And then we have two dogs guarding the temples on the path to those temples. The dogs correspond with the opposing temples. Basically, the way I see this card is temptation. The experience of the spirit is temptation. As you're walking along the service to others path, you're going to meet black dogs. You're going to meet seemingly friendly and benign occurrences that are just subtly there to shift you to the other path or make a choice that isn't for the path that you're on. And the service to self path has the opposite problem. Well, the same problem, but the opposite path. They have the white dog tempting them to serve others, trying to elicit sympathy and empathy out of them, and etc. So I was, maybe it was like a month ago, I was like driving in my car and I was listening to music, and it was the song Dog Days, or Dog Days Are Over by Florence and the Machine. and I always try, I'm always listening to the lyrics and interpreting them through symbolism. And so I'm trying to like figure out like the dog days are over. Like, what does the symbolism mean? What are they talking about? And I had the thought that dog days might refer to, because the dog days are over, like that's a celebration. Like the dog days are a bad time. And so I thought maybe the dogs correlate to the experience of the spirit of temptation. And now this is over. This experience, this initiation, essentially, the dog days are over. And that's why she's so joyous and gleeful. And I was like, oh, that's really, I kind of resonated and it felt good. And I look over and walking down the street is a lady and she has 2 poodles, one black poodle and one like cream tawny poodle that are both like the same size, walking like in 2 hands, walking down the street. And it was just like, it was one of those synchronicities that's just kind of like, okay, well that's the more, again, it was just confirmation that I'm using the archetypical language in an ongoing way with myself, which I hope I never stop doing. It's really, like, that's what's powerful, is that's how you can learn about yourself and what you want to know. So there's an introduction, I guess. Basically, I started learning the mind archetypes first. There's more written on the mind archetypes in the Law of One. I really set my intentions to learn this, I guess was the point I started trying to make. And I knew it was powerful. I knew it was important. I knew that there hadn't been enough work done from the raw material on this part of the raw material. So I set my intentions and I started working, and I was able to, I wrote something about the mind cycle even. I felt like I had a decent enough grasp of what was going on there to write something concrete into words, and I did. And then I got to the body cycle and I was like, what the heck? What is this? What does this even mean? What do these symbols mean? And so I hit a wall. And I realized that wall was, I wasn't done with the mind cycle. I wasn't done learning the mind cycle in a full way, because Ra does say the first step is knowing the mind. So the body cycle is a reflection of the mind. So it isn't until you know what's going on in the mind that you can recognize the reflection for what it is. Yeah, I started, I have a bunch of pets now, as everyone probably knows at this point. And I started learning a lot about second density and how the body works, how the second density body works, because that's all we are, even as third density creatures. We're just second density with a awareness of our eternal divine nature, and a few genetic manipulations that allow us to be more dexterous and have fancier vocalizations and whatever. But ultimately, what we're doing here is we're trying to link that higher consciousness with this animal body vehicle that we've taken on for this experience. And so it's about understanding this animal body and, the catalyst of the body, that wheel. Again, it's about survival. It's about how we've evolved specific neuro dynamics, I guess, that facilitate the survival and procreation of our body complexes, because that's just a part of what creates these experiences, what creates these first, second, and third density experiences. So understanding and recognizing, it's we spend so much time trying to elevate ourselves above animals that we forget to look at all of the ways that we're the same. Animals experience emotions, they experience desires, these things that we don't understand about ourselves a lot of the time are actually coming from our physical body and our physical reactions to the physical environment. You can't just rationalize yourself out of instinctual behaviors all the time. Ultimately, that's sort of the goal, I guess, but not in a cold and rigid and strict way, because that's what the body's about. Then if we go to experience of the body, she has two options. She can be rigid and cold and violent to subjugate the fear of the body, which is manifested in the lion, because that's what's really happening is, we're afraid of our natural environment, and that's what makes us feel fear in our personal vehicles. We're afraid of starving or getting ill or these kinds of things. And so we can force these dangers into submission, or we can accept and have compassion for that which is essentially out of our control sometimes. Being afraid is a lot of the time just out of our control. And recognizing that and being okay with that and having compassion for that animal self that's just afraid of not surviving situations. Like, that's really what it comes down to a lot of the time. And I was watching something else too that was making me think about this today, about the experience of the body, and about how it's also just, even more simply, it's about negative reinforcement or positive reinforcement. Either don't do that which I don't like, or do that which I do like. And it's more about cultivating the positive responses of the body than punishing the negative responses of the body. So I had a lot of words there. Is there anywhere you'd like me to go specifically from where I've been, or somewhere different? Or John says loving this. Okay, good. Sometimes, I start talking and I'm loving it, but again, it's such a kind of a nebulous thing. I don't know. I really, when I set my intentions to learn this, I did it so I could teach it. That was the other aspect. I want to learn it so I can teach it. So I have the responsibility to teach it, but I also hopefully have some abilities. I feel like people respond to it. It really is. It's the way that the energies just fall into place. It's the way that the Logos has designed the complex structure of light and energy to fold and braid into itself in specific ways and patterns. The patterns are a part of it. Learning how to create the patterns we want, or remove ourselves from the patterns based on fear, essentially, is I think a lot of it. John says, you mentioned the catalyst of the body, that some of it has weird symbols on it. What do I make of the symbols? All right, let's see here. Catalyst of the body. Okay, so the wheel within the wheel, as Ra mentions. That's something I've pondered a lot. Again, it is about the cycles, the minute, the hour, the day, the week, the month, the year, the transit of Saturn, the cycles of the moon. All of these things affect us in different ways, and they're all like a clock. They all travel, and the clock strikes these different times based upon what part of the 360-degree circle it's upon and the speed of that circle transit. So that's obviously one of the main symbols of the wheel. Again, the other symbol of the wheel that I've kind of more recently understood is that of the wheel of I'm not sure for sure if I want to draw direct correlations to the chariot or not, because Ross says that there isn't anything that draws the chariot. It kind of just automatically goes down, kind of moves on its own. I don't know, but I do think about the neural pathways creating ruts, the wheel getting stuck in these ruts as a physical manifestation and metaphor for what happens. So what I see on the wheel is two entities stuck to the wheel, and both of them are attached to the wheel at their orange chakras, which I think ties in a lot to consumption. The reason I think about this a lot is because I see the way my animals react to food, right? Like, they could just be, they're in their own world doing their own thing, but if I show up with a treat or a snack or something that they really want to eat, they become completely different. They totally shift. They become really excited and just so excited. And, you know, I've also been a waitress, so I've experienced that with humans. You know, when I'm walking to a table and I have their food and they're hungry and they finally see me coming and they just light up and they're so excited to get their food. Like, food is so important. We have to eat food 3 times a day, and I think not just food, but the other things that we have to consume to survive, the other parts of the planet that we have to consume to survive, I think that is something that keeps us attached to the wheel. I don't really know what else I have to say about that right now. I know I'll have more someday, but that's what I see. The entity who's going down is attached through the I'm pretty sure Rob refers to it as like the snake coming out of the sacral chakra, so the blocked orange ray. But the entity who's spiraling upwards is attached to the wheel to the actual wheel. The wheel is attached to their orange ray, whereas on that downward entity, the wheel is attached to their yellow ray, or to their red ray. So, yes, that's what I see. And I also see they're both attached by their throats and or mouths to the wheel, directly. So that's what I see there. The Sphinx at the top is the higher consciousness that we try to employ that says, I want to be out of this rut. I don't want to participate in this rut anymore. This isn't the way that I want myself to behave automatically in a situation. I want to have different automatic reactions. The first step is recognizing that you want to have other reactions, right? And that's what we're talking about, is that frustration that comes between that gap of realization and actually being able to remove ourselves from participating in those automatic reactions. So yeah, that is about the extent of my understanding of the symbolism directly on the card and what the symbolism is saying or referring to. Ethan says he likes the consumption, attaching people to the wheel. Yeah, that's just something that I've thought of, because I think about how, and I'm going to tangent a bit maybe, but you know, a lot of the things we buy every day, like this was probably made in China by someone who was making $1 a day and lives in a factory where there are nets outside the windows so that their human property doesn't terminate itself. And you know, it's like these things that we buy, I think when we're in awareness of this type of stuff, we incur a sort of karma for taking that, thinking that we need this, taking this from the earth and requiring someone else to slave to make it and being okay with that. Like, I think on that level too, what we consume keeps us trapped in what we're doing. Or just, there's, you know, how we're exploited by the wage system, about how we have to go to work every day and pay our bills and these types of things, and because of what we need to consume. And then advertising tells us we need to consume all these other things, so we need even more money, and we're just going in a circle and repeating, you know, go to work Monday through Friday, have the weekend off, ad infinitum. But it's hard to escape these things. It's again, it's just the wheel keeps turning and getting off. It's just, but then there's also the meta aspect of the repeating catalyst, where we do come into our incarnations with a handful of very specific lessons that we want to learn, and we're going to repeat unconsciously the lack of understanding of those lessons over and over and over again, as we have for like lifetimes probably, until hopefully we get it. And there's a lot of intense catalyst at this juncture, so I think that's why the catalyst is so intense. It's like, come on, get it this time. Just get it. It's like, what? I want to get it. Help me. But it's interesting. I just read a Quo channeling about how someone asked Quo if our guides will sometimes not answer us. And Quo says yes, that sometimes if your guide sees that this lesson is better learned without support and help, that they will not offer support and help. Which is kind of an interesting thing to think about. Because I think I kind of always thought, like, if I asked my guides to be there, that they would help. But of course they're not going to help in the ways that you want, but so yeah, thanks guys. I really I love talking about this stuff. If you have any other jumping off points of where you'd like to go. Okay, I've got one from Ethan here. How do you feel about utilizing physical symbols in daily life? Examples being talisman, or even my t-shirt with the High Priestess card on it. Oh, that's fun. So I think having magically charged symbols is totally, this is one of mine. I like to wear it. It's people notice it, and it's I charge it and wear it over my heart, and I think talismans can be really, really cool and powerful. I have one thing that I've cautioned about before is if we put too much power into some sort of talisman, if I think that this is my magic cup and this is what gives me my powers to have my Twitch stream, and then tomorrow I break my magic cup, and then I'm like, oh no, I don't have my magic anymore. If you associate that being the only way to access intelligent infinity, essentially, it can become a block. But if it's just a tool, because I've had different heart crystals essentially before. I've had a few. I lost one once, just completely lost it, and I was devastated. It was really hard. I gave one away. So just being kind of fluid, I think, is important. Being able to not get too attached to one item as being the sole item. But absolutely, anything that draws you to recognition of divinity, I think that's really a powerful thing. I think that's carrying those types of symbols are definitely useful and beneficial. Again, it's like when I see a hawk. I can't carry a hawk in my pocket, but when one flies over my car, when I'm deep into thought driving down the road, it always feels really nice, and it makes me feel close to that which I associate with divinity, and it pulls me out of the moment, and it just changes your frame of reference, just shifts it just a little, helps. John says, I imagine that our guides are always allowed to send love and light like us, even when they don't offer information to honor our learning. That's what I feel too, is if you're like, hey, I'm having a hard time paying my bills this month, like maybe help me out a little bit or something, and then nothing happens, and then you're like, well, why doesn't the universe want to support me? But, you know, they're still giving you love. They're still there watching. They're watching. They just have a greater awareness of like what you need and how much you can take, where your breaking point is. And so like becoming flexible so that your breaking the goal is that we become flexible so that our breaking point gets, you know, further and further. We can handle more and more, but then, you know, then we get more and more catalyst, and that's the fun law of responsibility. I will not carry hawks in my pocket. Sometimes I have a pigeon on my head, but I don't have hawks in my pocket. So yeah, I feel like I'm at a pause if either of you have any other questions or comments or direction, or you just want me to pick up somewhere else and let my motor go. I love this setup because it's like, sometimes I don't know what I'm going to say too. Sometimes I say stuff and I'm like, oh, hey, you know, that sounds pretty good. That's kind of a cool way of looking at it. Sometimes I say stuff that I know that I've repeated over and over, but that I've already settled on being a good way of looking at it. But sometimes I'm like, yeah, I like that. So yeah, that's why it's you're definitely serving me. And I feel a little bit selfish when I'm like, where are the questions? Where are they? Oh, hi, Jeremy. Jeremy wants me to talk about my daily spiritual rituals or routines. Don't know if you've been here the whole time, but I started talking about that, not my own. I referenced Jim's intense routines and how what we want to do is create routines that are... Have you been here the whole time? Anyway, my routines are not as great as I'd like them to be. Most of the time, we meditate twice a day. We meditate in the morning and the evening. Sometimes if things are a little hectic, the morning one gets skipped, but the evening one is always there. The first meditation of the day, whether it's morning or evening, we say, we start with a prayer that me and my husband created together. So we say that prayer, basically talking about wanting to heal ourselves so we can help heal others and see the Creator and stuff like that. Then we light incense. We have bells we ring to start. And then we meditate. Lots of times we'll do a little bit of yoga before we meditate. And then after the meditation, we say this prayer of St. Francis and ring our bells again. So we do that in the morning, or if we miss the morning meditation, we still do that in the evening. In the evenings before our meditation, we always read from A Calendar of Wisdom by Tolstoy. We're actually probably like on our third time through it, I feel like, so maybe it'll be time to move on to something else. But A Calendar of Wisdom is 366 days of Tolstoy, and he has collected quotes of his own and from other people, and each day has a bit of a theme, and a lot of the times the theme of what Tolstoy talks about can correlate to a theme of the day prior, and I have other rituals that involve my animals, obviously. We each do different care for them. I usually, sometimes at least once a day, will bring a treat out to the chickens. So that's a ritual. And I feed the pigeons in the morning and the rat in the evening. There's like a ritual aspect of that, of just, again, like the animals recognizing the food moment and they're so excited. It's fun. Oh yeah, Jeremy says he missed the beginning. Yeah, we totally started talking about how the catalyst of the body, as our quick recap, the catalyst of the body being a wheel, and our brain creating neural pathways, and the wheel essentially getting stuck in ruts because we use these same pathways and create these habits unconsciously, and how what we really want to do is create conscious habits that we feel like are serving us, but the gap between seeing the habits we want to create and actually creating those habits is extremely frustrating. Or escaping the bad habits, the gap between that, we were talking about that. So but you inspire me, Jeremy, because I know you have a morning routine that you do almost every day in the morning. And yeah, I still sometimes struggle with not doing it in the morning, which is not my favorite. Jeremy says it's the most intricate interpretation of the kettles of the body he's ever heard. You came in at the right time. We've just been talking about the archetypes, actually, and it's been fun. So here you are. Yeah, that was the wheel rut in the neural pathway. That's one of the things that I'm really like. I try not to be too impressed with my own thoughts and brains, but it's like one of those connections I made that was like, that's so helpful to understanding what's going on. And I love the cross of the metaphor and yeah. So I had a dream once in one of my many failed attempts at quitting marijuana. And I had a dream where, and this was, before I probably even made this connection, but I think the strong visual of this dream has remained long enough to create this memory. But I had gone without weed for a while, and I was good, and we were gonna go camping the next day. And I had a dream that on the way camping, we stopped off at the weed store, because we have weed stores here in Colorado. But right outside the weed store, my car got stuck in a rut, like literally, and I knew even then exactly what the dream meant, but we still went and got weed before we went camping. And so I knew like that was a juncture where I had an option to like not fall back into that rut, but I just did anyway. And why do we do this? These poor little monkey bodies that just experience such high moments of pleasure that are fleeting, and we just try to like grasp at those. And I think, yeah, that consumption of pleasure, that's what keeps us stuck on the wheel a lot of the time. Jeremy said, oh, it's really good, but the delay has me not sure what you're referring to. John says, speaking of routines, I remember being amused hearing row, row, row your boat the first time after consideration. I noticed saying life is but a dream is quite similar to Ross saying we are dancing thoughts. And yeah, Jim actually used to talk about it in his blog. It was Carla's habit to sing a hymn each day. And as her body started to deteriorate more and more and she couldn't read from the hymn books, they started singing Row, Row, Row Your Boat, because it's a very simple but still spiritual song. So he's carried that over after her passing and as part of his routine to sing Row, Row, Row Your Boat. And also because he's not a singer like Carla and can't really sing hymns. That was the other part. Once he had to lead the singing, it had to be something simple enough that someone who's not a trained vocalist can do. Yes, so Jeremy asks about Significator of the body. What a good question. Here's one I haven't thought about in a minute. So, alrighty. So, one way I look at the significators is, obviously you're supposed to pair it with the Fool card, but I pair it to give me contrast and understanding. I've paired the significators with the matrices. So, for instance, the matrix of the mind is Ra says is the blank slate, the mind unperturbed by other thoughts, awaiting potentiation. And the significator then of the mind is the extreme polarization of that, I guess. The significator has many thought forms built upon it, all sorts of elaborate costumes and stage design, and so whereas the matrix is the starting point, the significator is the furthest one can get from the matrix. So with the matrix of the body, we have, the state of equilibrium, everything happening all at once, nature perpetuating itself, and undisturbed in harmony, even, usually, in a undistorted, healthy state, healthy body. Whereas the significator of the body then is the cessation of action, the total removal of the ability to act and influence the manifest environment and body. Ross says that just as trees use movement for their meditation, we need to stop our movement and our thoughts as a means of meditation, because we're constantly moving and constantly in thought. So yes, I see this as the total extreme, I don't want to say opposite. Again, the polarization from the environment that is full of life and movement and action, and the complete cessation of action. It's definitely one I need to think about more. Paired with the, how do I get it? The Fool. How do I get the Fool back? There's a way, right? There we go. Yeah, and I love the questions too, because it shows me where I definitely need to think more, and then I do. The Fool's a complicated one. I have fleeting thoughts about the Fool a lot of the time. The way I see the Fool as the beginning and the end, the beginning Fool is the early third density entity who embarks on a journey, starting with not much, starting as what we would call maybe even like a savage. I don't know, that's not politically correct. What's the proper description of someone who's wearing animal skins? He's wearing animal skins. He has 2 very small bags, and he's on a journey. His possessions are minimal. The significators, again, are reflections of that. Here he is, not on a journey, but on a stage, not with just a small amount of items, but with many extravagant items. And again, here he's not walking, he's suspended his action, and the only items he has are the items that are on his body. He's not even carrying anything else with him. And then here we have the significator of the spirit, then the opposite being he's unified. There's 2 instead of the 1. The end of the journey, the symbolic end, or the second version of the Fool I see is the wanderer, or who has come into third density, who brings a few specific items and traits and gifts with them, but also hopefully by the end of the journey sees the foolishness of the sort of extravagance of the show. So as this is where the journey starts and where the journey ends, being that somewhere along the way we go through the various states of the significator, and then we balance it back out to, okay, I'm only taking with me what I need. And the animal skins aren't the clothing of the uncivilized, but the animal skins are using the environment in a cooperative way. And you know, to clothe the body, you know, we don't need, again, we don't need slaves in other countries making us fancy garments. You know, it doesn't have to be that complicated. The things we need are much more simple than we think. So the end of the journey is, again, allowing that which is not needed to fall away. And, you know, the Great Way of the Mind, one of the things Ross says is that the Sphinx have the one bended leg, showing that there needs to be periods of rest, that there needs to be periods of inner retreat, that you can't just be pulling the chariot at all times. I think part of the significator of the body is about that, about recognizing and choosing that rest, because again, the body cycle is about learning to cooperate with the physical body, with the animal vehicle that we inhabit, and trying to cultivate control over the habits, or discipline, with lack of attachment, as Ross says, to the body, and what it does. So yeah, and I don't know if you came in as we were talking about that at all before, but we were talking about how, you know, there's the two ways that we work with the body. We either reinforce, we use positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement. You know, the transformation of the body then is that harvest of the past experiences that we do want to take with us. You know, the scythe is there to harvest, but the scythe can also remove. So it's that process of saying, okay, I'm going to leave this behind, but I'm going to take this with me. But again, it's that gap that we were talking about, that gap between catalyst and transformation. Like, how do you bridge that? And I think it's experience, again, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. And maybe it's somewhat like the transformation of the mind, where you have to be very much, you know, on the straight and narrow. You can't deviate from the choice of positive reinforcement. And then, you know, subjugate the body. Being, you know, an example being, and it's so hard because, you know, it's just part of our culture and how we understand how to work with our body. We want to medicate our body, right? Like, if we're sick, if we have a headache or something, you know, we do things to try to remove that pain. But I think we just skip the step of having compassion for that pain, understanding, trying to correlate what input has come into the body to cause that pain, and finding a way then to remove it, and to get off that part of the cycle. Okay, so that was some talking about the body. Oh, Ethan, I'm so sorry. So Ethan was a little lost from the graph. Okay, so I use this all the time. I'm so sorry for projecting understanding of what's going on here. So the first row is the mind cycle. The second row is the body. The third row is the spirit. And then we have the columns are matrix, potentiator, catalyst, experience, significator, transformation, great way. So I'm so used to reading it this way. Thank you for saying something so that I can be more aware that that's not as intuitive for other people to read this this way. The fact is, so much of the beginning of the archetypes is learning the language and learning, just correlating that symbolism. Like, you know, I learned astrology and like learned how to read charts, and, you know, there's just so many symbols that you have to learn, but then those symbols take on a deeper meaning than what a word would mean, basically. And that's really the point. But again, this is part of the language that I've been using to communicate with, and so I apologize again. Thank you for saying something. Ethan, would you like me to explain like what the matrix, potentiator, catalyst, experience, significator, transformation, and great way are to the best of my ability? Or I'll go anywhere. Okay, yes, I can sort of give a bit of a introduction to what's going on, hopefully. Again, the words have a meaning that is hard to articulate. So, you know, we have three matrices: the mind, the body, and the spirit. And these are the framework within which our mind, our body, and our spirit, as separate entities trying to work together in harmony, they're operating in these different frameworks, though, and these frameworks are reflections of themselves. Again, the matrix of the mind is the blank slate. The matrix of the body is that which is constantly perpetuating itself. I always think of like a rainforest or a jungle where the air is wet and there are bugs everywhere and it's just full of life, and you can't suppress the life even without a lot of effort and fires or whatever. And then the matrix of the spirit is darkness and evil, essentially, or perceived evil. Really. One thing that you can't really see from this version of the picture, but in the other deck I have, which is a more recent version of this deck, you can see that the entities have chains on them, but they're not chained to anything. I think that's always an interesting way of looking at the matrix of the spirit. Like, we feel like we're in bondage, but we're not actually in bondage. It's about finding a way to not feel like you're in bondage. So, the matrices are the framework. The potentiator is that which feeds the matrix, okay? So the potentiator of the body is the subconscious mind. It's the all mind, the deeper mind. It's access to intelligent infinity. Between the matrix and the potentiators are where the veil lies. And it's this act of breaking through the veil, not to use a violent term like breaking through the veil, but piercing the veil, that allows us to, this is the work we're doing, basically. So the potentiator is the subconscious mind, so the matrix and potentiator of the mind. The whole mind cycle is about the proper use of how to pierce through the veil. So the catalyst of the mind, then, is the... Maybe I don't need to get that deep. We're still talking just about catalyst. So catalyst is the experience that the mind, body, and spirit give us after we have some interaction between the matrix and the potentiator. So an interaction between the matrix and the potentiator gives us catalyst. And then once we know what to do with the catalyst, that's when we have experience. So again, with the body, the catalyst is the wheel. The catalyst is the unconscious processes that our brain creates through habit. The experience is how we treat those unconscious processes. Same with catalyst of the mind. The catalyst of the mind is anything that comes before the mind. Experience of the mind is how we've distilled that catalyst. And for the mind, we can distill catalyst we can choose. We can say this catalyst is positive and this catalyst is negative, regardless of what the catalyst is. Every catalyst has the potential of being seen as positive or negative in the mind. In the body, however, the reflection is that catalyst of the body is objectively bad or good. Whereas, say, in the body or in the mind, if you break your leg and you can't walk for 6 weeks, that's for the body, that's a very objectively bad thing. The body can't take care of itself properly. The body will need help from others to take care of itself. The body's broken, it's not in a functioning state. In the mind, however, you can say, okay, well, this is serving me because of this, or this is teaching me patience, this is teaching me to accept love from others. In the mind, we can turn any catalyst into a positive thing. But in the body, there is objectively bad or objectively good catalyst. And again, we were talking about the experience of the spirit. It's slightly different. The catalyst of this spirit is, to me, what I see is it's the line between hope and nihilism. Either everything matters or nothing matters. And then the experience of the spirit is deciding, again, what risks you're willing to take, what you're willing to sacrifice. It's the process of initiation, of going through that initiation, is catalyst and experience of spirit. So again, the significator, all the other ones work in pairs, but the significator, Ross says, to pair with the Fool card. But again, the significator is the rubber. So, I already kind of described the matrix and the significator for the body and the mind. So the matrix of the spirit, again, is darkness. So the polarization of that is darkness and separation and bondage, right? The feeling of being chained to something. Whereas the significator of the spirit is illumination and no chains, no devil, flowers, and they've chosen to bond themselves together. They've chosen to hold hands. There are no chains binding them. So the significator is about taking the hand we're dealt because of the veil and experiencing the greatest extrapolation of the possibilities through the archetypes of the mind, body, and spirit. Significator is really hard to define in a way it's really kind of it's a philosophical thing for sure, like a psychological kind of thing where we have it kind of goes to the conversation we were having earlier, Jeremy, about we're not the archetypes, we're performing the archetypes. I feel like that has a lot to do with the significator, is the performance of the archetypes. So the transformation is the act of the proper distillation of catalyst and experience. So the transformation of the mind is about Ross says it's literally about courting the maiden and stuff like that, but it's about letting go of negative thoughts and seeing others as a means to an end. So that's the transformation of the mind, is that process of letting go of that which separates. And again, the transformation of the body is about, whereas the transformation of the mind is more of a surrender, again, a letting go. The transformation of the body is more selective. Again, it's like saying, okay, well, I want to do my meditation in the morning tomorrow. I don't want to wake and bake tomorrow. And saying that and trying to harvest that transformation. And, Ross says that that there's a new aspect of ourselves available in every moment. And so in any moment we can say, I'm done with this, I'm going to do this instead. That's available all the time. But again, our theme tonight is that frustration of not being able to really achieve the transformation of the body in a meaningful way, and why. That's a good question. So the transformation of the spirit, what I see is that when you're illuminated to a certain point out of the darkness, you're called to act in a way that begins to be less and less out of your control. Again, there's more of a surrender aspect to it, but there isn't even a surrender aspect. It's that you almost don't even have a choice. Ross says that, when an entity who is open in the indigo ray, their experience of catalyst is to see love, and that the act of accessing intelligent infinity automatically has the release of service to others. One way I've taken that is that when you're in that state of being open in the indigo ray, that's all you really want to do is serve others. That's what you see as the only thing. That's the most important thing. But this experience for the transformation of the mind, I think, is available on both paths, where it's hope and nihilism. You can surrender and be called to a nihilistic viewpoint in action as well. So then the great way is, I guess you can say, the culmination of the previous archetypes in the cycle. Basically, if the transformation is achieved, the more the transformation is achieved, the more the great way is accessible. So the transformation of the mind is the chariot, which is not harnessed to its steed. It's a modified version of the Significator, basically a stage, but it's a stage that moves. Ross says again that it just that it travels without effort, and I think about, for me, when there are times when, it's that sweet spot where your skills and your desire to serve kind of mesh perfectly so that you can serve others in an extremely effortless way, because the ruts of previous habits have allowed the facilitation of this energy to move much more quickly and easily without a lot of expenditure. So, for instance, when I go to homecoming and I have to help with food or anything like that, going to homecoming and helping with homecoming, for me, there's so much work to do, but it's so easy because that's what I've done for my job for so long, is event setup, food handling, making sure, corralling people and making sure they're in the right place at the right time, all this kind of stuff I'm just so used to doing that it doesn't require a lot of effort for me to do it on an even bigger scale. And then especially when it's combining into being obviously a great service that others are going to love and appreciate and really truly be moved by, I think that's how the great way kind of manifests. So the great way of the body then is the alchemist, and this is the old philosophical metaphor, I guess, of turning that which is crude into that which is refined. So that's, I think, basically the great way of the body. Again, taking taming the animal body in a way that allows the manifestation of the positive and beneficial aspects of what our brains are capable of doing as far as interacting with our minds. You know, an analogy Quo likes to use is the rock tumbler. Quo says, you know, Catalyst is about going into the rock tumbler and you bang against the walls for a long, long time, and then eventually what comes out is a nice little gem. That's what I think a lot about the alchemist, or the Athener, you know, as Ra also calls it. It's the, you know, that's why we come here to this third density, is to experience this extreme catalyst, the ability to take that which is crude and refine it into that which is, you know, Ross says that everything can be elevated to sacramental. You know, that means scrubbing the floors, doing the dishes, you know, all this kind of stuff that is maintenance for the body, can be elevated into a way of honoring the Creator. And I think that's what the Great Way of the Body is about. So the Great Way of the Spirit then is sort of a culmination of all of it, because the whole point of this is to get the mind, body, and spirit working in a way that they aren't warring with each other, that the mind isn't trying to overwrite the body and the spirit or any other way, that all of these things are seeing the same goal as desirous. So you see here the conscious mind is a tuned instrument that the subconscious mind is playing. And that's basically the goal, is we want to tune our instruments so that the Creator can manifest in the ways that the Creator, you know, we have the dichotomy of free will and the Creator's will. And so we have free will to choose not the Creator's will. But what we really do want and seek is to choose and experience the Creator's will through the unique vibration of our personal experiential distortions. So tuning ourselves to that specific state that we are, so that the Creator can pop in and play a beautiful song when that song is needed to comfort or be there or serve in whatever way, or even to be a difficult person. You know, sometimes if you really tune yourself, there are going to be times when you're going to have a difficult experience or not get along perfectly with someone, and that's part of being, you know, in the proper in your unique balance. You know, Ross says it's not about having all of your chakras perfectly unblocked and crystallized, or that there's a set way that the chakras need to be balanced, but that each person has their own personal balance. And that's what makes us all infinitely unique instruments of the Creator, and that's what we're trying to do. And yes, how was that? Or where can I go? Jeremy says a little brief. I'm assuming you're joking. Okay, good. I mean, I keep looking down, like I go off on a tangent, and I look down and I was like, is that like 15 minutes that have passed since I like looked at the chat and took a question? Okay, good. Awesome. Thank you, because I really I want to trial and error how I articulate these things, because I do want to make videos that are like, okay, I can make a video on YouTube and there'll be like an overview like I just did, which I felt like I did an okay job of, and I haven't done that before really in a sort of tried to be concise way. So that's good. And then I want to be like, you know, mind cycle, body cycle, spirit cycle, and then go into it from there. But you kind of have to lay the groundwork before you can really get into the, you know, the deep stuff. So yeah, does anyone have any other specific areas that they're interested in talking about? Or Ethan says he thinks he needs more knowledge on the card symbols to be able to understand how they relate. Well, what Ross says truly is the first thing that you need to do is to look at the cards and say, okay, this is a this, this is a this, this is a this. Maybe this means this, and begin that mapping for yourself. Because again, this is an internal process, and the symbols are always going to be subjective, no matter what. They're universal, but they're also subjective. So that is definitely the first step, and it's an important step, and it takes a long time. But and again, it's like I can look at these, a lot of them, and still say I don't know what those symbols mean, and I've been studying this for a long time. I just hope that eventually they'll be revealed to me in a way, and a lot of them have. Again, like with the wheel stuff. Yeah, you just gotta, if it's something that I really find it valuable as just a framework, as an extrapolation of the framework Ra has given us into a more subconscious communication. Instead of, because the raw material, it's so easy to just keep it up in the logical mind and not let it go deeper. But I think Ra's just trying to encourage us to have that deeper experience. But, Ra has to preserve our free will, and Ra can't say, you need to do this is what you have to do, this is the step you have to take, etc., etc. But honestly, what drew me to the archetypes is hearing Toby Wheelock's interpretation or experience of listening to all of the audio and hearing how excited Ra is to speak of the archetypes. I realized something that kind of like rang a bell in my head, and I was like, it's really interesting that all the other sessions Ra speaks very slowly, but then when Ra starts speaking of the archetypes, they get markedly more excited and transmitting more words in each moment. And I was like, there must be something important there. John says, yes, you must become competent at viewing pictures. Yes. Yes. Because again, Ross says that, but that really is kind of an important part. I don't want that to discourage people, but because a lot of this Egyptian symbolism too is, it's like, yeah, I've spent some time looking into Egyptian symbolism and trying to figure out what some of the weirder, more esoteric symbols are, and that can be helpful too, because it's just again creating that map. But again, the map is subjective in a lot of ways, and almost always. Let me grab you the link real quick to where you can buy it on Amazon. Sorry to... So, okay, so, Ethan, are you in the Law of One Facebook group? There is a gentleman in that group who has made copies of this actual, these cards, here on Amazon. This is the Brotherhood of Light deck here. This is what the deck originally is, but this is a more modern version of the deck, and it's colored. I have both versions. I primarily, most of the time when I'm thinking or pondering the archetypes and I'm looking at a visual image, I usually just pull this up. But if I'm looking at the hard copies of the cards, I like having both of them. Sorry, I did this wrong. So here's the Amazon link. But there's someone, James Gowron, is that his name? He offers to send copies. I think he pays $8 for them or something like that. So if you give him $10 to cover shipping and what he paid for the cards, I'm certain he would send you a copy of the of the original black and white ones, because he's offered that before. So I hope I'm not overstepping by offering that to you. But I think, like I said, he's offered it before, and he's just happy to share. He has, like I said, he ordered like a dozen decks so that he can share them with people. And he just sent me one because he found my article and was so moved by my article. He was like, "You would probably like this. Here you go." And I was like, "Yes, I do." And they're in my purse. So, yeah, I don't know if you, are you in the Facebook group? I think, are you? Otherwise, I can, maybe try to create a group chat here on Facebook or something and get you both connected. Or I'll just try to pull up his Facebook and give you a link to that, and you could probably just message him and tell him I sent you. Like, "Hey, Jade sent me." I think he'd be fine with that. But yeah, so I'll get that going. My internet's lagging up right now, and Facebook's not loading, so. Oh, which Facebook group? The Law of One Raw Material Study Group is the one that I know that I've seen him post and offer to give these decks to people. I think we're kind of skirting some like copyright laws here, but yeah, I thought maybe you were in there. Yeah, my Facebook's really hanging up right now, so but yeah, I'll get you in touch with him, because yeah, I know he already has a bunch of copies that he was offering to give out. So yeah, I have both. I like the, yes, James Garon, yes, thank you, John. Thank you, John. Yeah, the colored ones are helpful because, like I said, you can kind of see a little bit more clearly what's going on in some of the images a little bit more. They are slightly different, but not very much different. But yeah, it just kind of helps you be a little bit more competent at viewing pictures. Because the pictures are just a little bit clearer to view. But, yeah, so if you need help reaching out to James, let me know. I just closed out on my Facebook, so I'm not leeching any bandwidth trying to do that right now. But, yeah. Otherwise, yeah, this is, if you didn't see the URL, it's thirddensity.com/tarot. It's pretty easy to remember, so that's also why I use this a lot. So yeah. 7:30, we've got about half an hour left to go. Talk more about archetypes or whatever. I'll see if anyone else has any suggestion of direction, or I will, in the meantime, I'll ponder something else to say. You know, now as I look, Jeremy, at the significator of the body, I think the word that keeps coming to mind for me is fasting. The intentional cessation of that which is quote-unquote necessary for the body. So we see here movement, and you think of meditation and short bursts as a representation of what's going on here. But I also think sometimes just the removal of sensory input and stimulation can help reset the body in a way so that we can more understand the purpose of stimulation coming into our body and what it's communicating to us. If we can quiet the body, then we can listen better. And actually, I'll share a little anecdote from Jim, actually. We were talking at it was before homecoming. I made lasagna, and he had to have a Diet Pepsi with his lasagna, and he was talking, or maybe it was a regular Pepsi, I don't know, but he was talking about how he's always had to drink Pepsi with pizza. Like, he loves that flavor combination, right? Something we're all familiar with and grew up with. And he had to have mouth surgery once, and he couldn't drink Pepsi for like 2 months or something. And he said ever since then, Pepsi's just never tasted the same. It's just never been the same experience of drinking that. Well, you know, like Diet Pepsi especially, it's a chemical concoction to create a flavor explosion in your mouth, and we become desensitized to these like really harsh flavor chemicals that we add to our food. So when it's something that you've been doing almost your whole life on a regular basis, and then you remove that from your diet, you can see the gap, you know, when you try to close that gap again. It's like, you know, for me, it's the same with like coffee. I was a daily coffee drinker for close to 30 years. I mean, we're pushing it over 25, and I quit drinking coffee, and so now when I drink coffee, I want to because it smells so good. But as soon as I drink it, it makes me feel gross and sick, and I can feel like my heart palpitating, and I can feel my stomach getting all tight, and the side effects from the coffee that a daily user has been able to kind of become used to, that the body has adjusted to, that the body's achieved this new homeostasis from that sensory input. Once you remove that sensory input and try to reintegrate it, you have to re-sensitize yourself, I think, in a lot of ways. It'd be the same for me with alcohol. You know, I used to drink all the time, and then I started getting migraines from it, and now if I drink even just half a beer or something, I feel like I might be getting a migraine or just kind of nauseated and gross. And I used to love booze, and it used to only make me feel good for the most part. And, you know, it's one of those things, it's like, it's a double-edged sword in a lot of ways, allowing for the resensitization of the body because we've desensitized ourselves to live in this environment of overstimulation. So I think when our body malfunctions, we don't have enough compassion or understanding for why it's reached a breaking point. When really it's just, a lot of the times we're just doing too much and we're inputting too much. You know, we're in front of our screens all day absorbing information, and that's exhausting to the body, you know? Like, it's a very new state that we haven't really quite evolved to catch up to. So I think that's some more about the significator of the body, maybe. Because he has, tied himself to a tree, and you sort of get the sense that maybe he's trying to understand the tree, comprehend the tree, listen to the tree, receive information from the tree. Yeah. So there's that. I feel like I haven't spent a ton of time. Maybe the potentiators are the ones I haven't really talked about a ton right now. The potentiator of the body is one that I don't have a super articulate conceptualization of. I've always thought what Joseph said about the significator or the potentiator of the body was quite profound and evocative. That basically the image of the potentiator taking his staff and inserting it into flowing water, and watching the water divert itself around the intrusion, essentially, stated in a non-biased way. So the potentiator of the body is that which is what is trying to make the choice of discerning what the body, how to use the body in a useful way, I think might be the words that Ra uses. Ra says something about it, learning to use the body in a useful manner. So while this is the matrix of the body is the uncultivated jungle, the potentiator of the body is the gardener who comes in and pulls the weeds and decides that these plants are beneficial and these plants are not beneficial, and these bugs are beneficial and these bugs are not beneficial, and maybe we need this input from an ecosystem outside of this ecosystem, or maybe we need to spray poison to kill the plants, or there's all sorts of ways to potentiate the body. Again, it's do I take medicine for my headache, or do I try to meditate and heal myself and communicate with the body about what has caused the headache, more than just trying to eradicate the headache? And that analogy can go forward again to the garden. Are you just trying to remove the weeds, or are you seeking a further understanding of why the weeds are there, as a part of the system as a whole? Are the weeds a sign of imbalance, or are the weeds just a natural manifestation of the current state of being? And what's the choice? Are you going to just accept the weeds? Are you going to, again, poison them, pull them, become in an all-out war with them? Some gardeners get that sort of mentality where they're in a battle with nature, and each year it's a new pest or problem that they have to find a way to work with. And again, you either use the positive introduction of, you encourage that which is beneficial instead of discouraging that which is harmful. I think that's a lot of how to balance the body. And again, it's removing the judgment. While things are objectively good and objectively bad in the body, all of these states are necessary. The objectively good and objectively bad experience are necessary experiences for growth and evolution, and just for our personal growth and evolution. Oh, John's here talking about the significator, saying often the figures are looking left, and this one he is looking right. Maybe when in trouble, hanging upside down, he must look right to call on light forces for help. I like it. I think of it as, if we go back to the fasting analogy, Ross says that fasting is about correlating the removal of foodstuffs, specifically what Ross talking about, but I don't think fasting has to just be about foodstuffs. Removing foodstuffs and drawing an analog to negative thought forms. So there's an aspect of faith involved in that you can, by ceasing actions and correlating the negative thought forms to those actions, you can program the body that way too. So maybe there is an important aspect to that. Interesting. One thing that I've thought about recently too is how the matrix of the spirit, it's a requisite of, John says, what do I make of the figure looking right? I think there might be the delay. Like I said, I think it's the aspect of faith, faith in sacrifice, because that's what fasting is a lot of the time. It's sacrifice. And he has the crossed legs in the T square, which Ross says is an alteration of the Ankh form, and the Ankh represents that which must be sacrificed to, because in manifestation we only value that which is possible to lose. So sacrifice is an important part of the archetypical system. And then I guess that does go to where I was going to go with the matrix of the spirit and it being primeval darkness, about how this is the setup for how our spirit operates. In third density, it needs this hellish experience, essentially. There's a song I really love. There's a band called the New Pornographers. They're one of my favorite bands, actually. And they have a song that they did as a cover called When I Was a Baby. And it's about how basically they are born onto Earth, but Earth is actually kind of the hell. They came from where they were above Earth, and now they've fallen into hell, and how can they escape? And, hell doesn't actually exist in the way that religion teaches us that hell exists. The real hell is third density experience in reality, where we're essentially have the feeling of being tortured without any context or concept of why we're experiencing this suffering and fear and darkness. So then the significator is the light. The potentiation, or the potentiator is the light. This is what potentiates the spirit, whereas the matrix is the total darkness. The potentiator is the influx of light. It can be a tiny, tiny little match lit in the darkness, or it can be something as giant as a lightning bolt firing and lighting up the whole sky. The correlation is that the experience of light is sort of brief. Again, it's one of the wheels. We have night and dark. We have light and day. Night and day, light and dark. But so the potentiator of the spirit, the effect is you gain a different viewpoint. The light shines in the darkness, and maybe for a moment you see that the chains aren't actually binding you to something. So because of that awareness, what the potentiator of the spirit is showing is the lightning struck tower. Ross says that the potentiator is actually the light, but the consequence of the light is that the tower falls. That which you thought was reality has to change and be altered because of the new awareness that you've gained by potentiating the spirit. And that process can be really painful. And again, it integrates into the body, and the law of responsibility. Again, it's like I for my experience, one experience I've had is I watched a documentary on fast fashion. And again, I've already mentioned it, the slaves who make our clothes and the terrible lives that they live in slavery, creating clothing for cheap that ends up in landfills in other countries. We buy it here in first world countries, and then we ship our garbage clothes that nobody wants anymore because the fad has passed and it didn't resell at the secondhand store. We ship all of those clothes to third world countries, and then they are literally just inundated with our trash, and they don't know how to deal with it either. We don't with our technology. They don't either. When I learned that I basically had to stop buying new clothes. I didn't really have an option. So that goes to the transformation of the spirit. It was just like, okay, well, I'm done with this. I don't need it. I can live without it. It's something I enjoyed because, you know, it's something girls are taught to enjoy, that they're allowed to enjoy, shopping for clothes and dressing themselves up. But, and I had, it's something specific that was difficult for me because growing up, my mom always made us shop at the thrift store. She'd always buy us clothes at the thrift store, and I hated it. Like, my dad always wore brand new clothes, really nice clothes, brand new shoes, but my mom would take us to the thrift store, and I just thought that was the cruelest injustice. And so through adolescence and into adulthood, I've learned to love the secondhand store, obviously, and that's where all my clothes come from now. So I can still enjoy that process of looking for clothes and finding fun things to wear, but I've had to shift in a lot of ways to get there. But part of that shift was from, you know, again, too, if we go back to the potentiation of awareness, my awareness as a small child that my dad was allowed to have nice new things, but I was, you know, forced to, from my small child vantage, forced to have dirty, stinky, old clothes that other people had worn. That was a painful awareness, and that, you know, made me operate from a certain framework for a while. But gradually, I like I said, I learned to love the other option. But yeah, so there's some integration of the body and the spirit, and these things just flow around through each other. And while they are separate concepts in and of themselves, they're rarely acting as singular concepts in and of themselves. They're usually kind of pinballing. It's like a pinball machine where you bounce from each one. So how are we doing, friends? We got like 15 minutes left. I can't really push it too much further than that because my husband has a scheduled Twitch stream to watch at 8 p.m. So I know I need to hand over my bandwidth so that he can watch for his thing. But yeah, if there are any other final questions or thoughts or whatever feedback or self-expression that anyone has right now. I've had a really fun time. I hope I don't really want to close it early, but I've enjoyed talking about the archetypes. So thanks for indulging me, everybody. Again, that sweet spot where service meets that which is effortless and even enjoyable. Well, thanks for being here, Ethan, and asking great questions and just seeking with me, seeking with us. It's nice to feel like we're seeking as a group. John says he could listen and listen. I need to make some YouTube videos. I know people like this stuff. Even if it's like whoosh, it's still like it hits them somewhere deeper, you know, and that's also one of those sweet spots. It's like a delicious little morsel that you're showing someone is possible to reach. Again, the motivation of food. It's so important. So useful and powerful. Yeah, you guys are great. I'm not sure if we lost Jeremy at some time or I don't think I've actually looked at the numbers or anything. If anyone else showed up, I'm happy if anyone shows up, and it's kind of fun to have a little group where we get a little deeper, you know. That's kind of like the balance too with my in-person group. It's like we want to hold a live or we want to invite newbies and like kind of cast the net wide, but also at the same time, if we can like keep it not posted in public places and bringing in people who are like, what is this? I just feel like this is cool and where I want to be. Like that experience of drawing people in that way is really cool, but at the same time, it's fun to also have a group where we can just kind of, where I don't have to like introduce the material or talk about really kind of the basic beginner intro stuff. John says, I almost said Ra said, fun slip. I would note that when Ra teaches about the magical working of healing, they start with knowing oneself, and the archetypes is so helpful in knowing oneself. Exactly. And that's why I feel like the process, first you start with the mind, and you start to figure out what's going on in the mind. And once you kind of can conceptualize a little bit what's going on in there, then you can start seeing how what you're thinking in the mind manifests as a reflection in the body. And then the body offers you symbols, whether it's a bird or a headache or an infestation, you know, and then how you react to those symbols is a feedback loop. And then once you start to learn how that feedback loop is facilitated and the mind and the body begin to have some sort of connection that harmonizes and is working together, that's when the spirit is able to use the mind-body complex as an instrument. That's when the shuttle is facilitated so that the spirit can come in and play the harp, you know. So yeah, it's about knowing what goes on in the mind as far as thoughts go, and then knowing what goes on in the body as far as the physical manifest laws of the universe or of the planet specifically, and then harmonizing those so that the spirit can come in and start doing its work. It's great. Like I said, it's I'll just give another example. I like I said, I think Jeremy's gone, but I shared this with Jeremy the other day. I was watching, I feel like I'm having this conversation again. I feel like maybe I did before. I was watching, I did tell this, but I'll tell it again. I was watching a critical theory of a movie, and so looking at the media of movies and seeing the symbolism and interpreting symbolism. I love that kind of stuff. It's all in this. It's all in the same thing. And so I was just watching it and, you know, kind of half in, half out. And the narrator says that at one point a character said something like, I don't fear death because I've already died. And to me, that went right to the image of the transformation of the body, where the death is smiling and there's a rainbow and he's got a scythe. And it made me think, okay, well, you know, obviously the transformation of the body doesn't fear death, and that seems to be an important aspect of the transformation of the body, to allow the various deaths of the self through the process of removing distortions and not being attached to those distortions as much, and just allowing them to fall away as you don't need them anymore. So yeah. Let's see, I have 10 more minutes. John and Ethan have expressed that they're good. If you change your mind, that's good too. You can just... Something else pops in here in the last 10 minutes. I feel like I should fill the space somehow. I keep looking and like, what can I say about this? What can I say about this? And I feel like I've talked about a lot of them in a way. And I can always go deeper, but it's hard to like just dive in, you know? So, I feel like I'll just, ramble a bit, I guess. I feel like the archetypes I feel like are most important that for me, that I feel I gain the most understanding from personally, and this is probably not going to be universal, but I feel like I've learned a lot from the transformation of the mind. I feel like I've learned a lot from the catalyst of the body, and I feel like I've learned a lot from the experience of the spirit. Or I guess what I should phrase is that I feel like I have a lot to learn. I feel like those are the like juiciest and most fertile areas where I really feel like I have a lot more learning to do. John says, talk about transformation of the spirit. All right. So, Ra calls the catalyst of the spirit faith or hope. And hope being the kind of positive interpretation of faith, because you can't have faith in nothing. Again, like I said, I feel like for catalyst, it's the dichotomy of hope, hopefulness, and nihilism, of seeing that there's purpose in everything, or of feeling like there's purpose in nothing. And sometimes, again, even you can see on the card, that's a razor thin line to walk a lot of the time. Like sometimes you just feel hopeless. You know, like look at the catalyst, she can't see what's going on. They can't see I was saying she, I'm pretty sure the catalyst of the spirit, I don't know, I'm assuming is she. She can't see the beauty that's being manifested behind her with her right hand. She only sees the nothingness of the infinite ocean, which is where she's pouring that which is from her left hand. So it's either nothing matters, or even if I don't see what's the manifestation of my good acts, they still matter. I feel like that's also an important framework to remember, to keep and to grasp a hold of. And I think that's a common capitulation, is that we do something and we think it's going to be an obvious feedback loop from the mind to the body. We think, okay, I'm going to feed this person and they're not going to be hungry anymore or something. And maybe you offer this person food, and maybe, it's a homeless person, and maybe they are mentally unstable and they just throw the food on the ground or something. We often make good gestures that seemingly fall short, and a lot of the time, or go contrary to what we were intending. And a lot of the time that is about learning the feedback loop between the mind and the body, and refining it so that we aren't doing that in a way that's directly harmful, that, where we're not serving, that feedback loop between the mind and the body is learning how to serve in a way that is useful. So even when we are serving in a way that we know should be useful, but it still doesn't manifest in the way that we would expect it to manifest, that can be really discouraging. Okay, so transformation of the body, or the spirit. Again, I was talking before about how it's like you just feel, because of your choice of having faith and hope or faith in nothing, both of those orientations allow for a higher density calling. That's how I see it a lot of the time. That we can, or from the higher self, that being in those states allow the transformation to occur. So when we're really hopeful about something, we're more likely to just dive right in, again, without thinking, to just just do it. And but the same thing if we're nihilistic, we're not going to think about it. We're just going to, a lot of people's, the non-dualism interpretation of the law of one is that we have free will. We only have to polarize 51%. It doesn't really matter what we do anyway, because we're going to eventually harvest no matter what, even if it's not in this lifetime. So I'm just going to do whatever I want. And, and that's one transformation of the mind, I think, or transformation of the spirit. But the other, again, is that, that hopeful, I think the aspect of the leap, we don't really have that in Ra's version of the tarot, but the leap is an important part of the Fool in the Rider-Waite deck, which is which I find interesting sometimes to look at too, because it's sort of the Western Anglo manifestation of symbolism for the same stuff, whereas this is obviously Egyptian. But that sort of leap of faith where you're not thinking about falling. You trust that you'll fly. You trust that you'll succeed. And then in the face of defeat, still picking yourself up and saying, okay, when you smash hard onto the ground, being willing to pick up and go, okay, well, I guess I'll try to find hope again and try to take another leap of faith that I can do good and manifest good. So yeah, I think I think there's the correlation too of obviously the transformation of the body with death. But here with death is consciously choosing and harvesting that which death wants to bring into its new incarnation. In the transformation of the spirit, the entities in the sarcophagus are bound. They don't have a choice. Their will is not necessarily a part of this experience. How was that, John? Was that a good way to wrap it up here? I've got all my cords stretched across and I'm just like all wired in. I feel like a hacker. So it'll be fun to reset my space here so that I can move again. I've bound myself to the tree. I've fasted from freedom of movement, and hopefully we've harvested something from this. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate everyone, those who participated in the chat, those who watched in silence. Hello, I see you too. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope there was something useful. And to wrap it up, the formal statements of I am not an authority on the Law of One or the archetypes or anything like that. I am a student and a seeker, and I just like talking about this, and I want people to have safe spaces where we can just kind of geek about this geeky philosophy. And yeah, and all glory to the creator, for giving us this really fun mystery and game and system of trial and error and disappointment and excitement and all the things we get from this. It's easy to get bogged down in the day-to-day stuff, but when we can step back and look at the wonder of what we're doing and really appreciate that we're even able to have these kinds of experiences, it's important to step into that frame of mind sometimes. So thanks to the creator, thanks to all my sub-creators who joined me here today, and I'll be doing this next week in the morning time for US people, and hopefully we'll have some international folks able to show up during the extra hours, the other hours in the morning. So thanks again, guys. I love you. I hope you have a great rest of your evening, day, week, month, whichever wheel that you're on. I hope it goes smoothly and down the ruts that you desire the most. Have a great one.